Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope everyone's getting comfortable to join us, getting set up for audio as well, because we will have some audio we can listen to, and for watching, because we have a lot to show you as well. Um, I hope everyone is settled in, so I'll go ahead and welcome you to the sixth in a series of online sessions for the automotive audio pillar of the AES's Audio Product Education Institute. That's the Audio Engineering Society's APEI initiative. And uh, what the APEI is doing is exploring practical approaches in designing and implementing automotive sound systems, in this case, and presenting that through this this forum, this method. So API focuses on promoting methodologies and practices and technologies, and are involved in developing and bring today with me my two industry experts. We have Matthias Johansson, sorry. He's co-founder and chief product officer of Dirac Research, and I'll give you a brief bio for those who don't know Matias. In 2001, Matias founded Dirac together with two other professors and three PhD students. And you served for the CEO as a CEO for Dirac for 11 years, and then recently moved into the CPO, the product development role, where he now focuses on product strategies. And during his leadership, Dirac grew to become a pioneer and leader in digital sound technology within automotive, audio, home audio, headphones, mobile audio, and hundreds of millions of audio devices are now equipped with Dirac sound optimization. And as a pioneer in the field, Matias has a rich experience in everything related to digital sound, and in particular, sound field control and immersive audio, which is the topic that we're talking about today. He holds a PhD in signal processing from Uppsala University. So welcome, Matias.
Thank you.
And the other gentleman who is our expert, Andreas Erhardt. He's the director of automotive at Dolby. So Andreas has been active in as a technology leader in audio industry for over 2 decades. He joined Dolby back in 2007, and since then served the company in various engineering and technology VP leadership roles, managing the teams that created solutions, scaling into billions of customer devices as well. Over the past couple of years, his focus has been on the market introduction of Dolby's next generation audio codec, AC4, as well as contributions to bring Atmos music experience to life. And these days, Andreas's focus is on developing, expanding Dolby's automotive business. So, welcome, Matias. I'm sorry, Andreas. I apologize.
No worries. Thanks for watching.
One more thing I will say is that you have a strong belief in concepts such as use case driven exploration, and very simple lean principles, rapid prototyping, collaboration with the industry. And also maintaining the artistic intent, which I think is the goal for all automotive audio engineers as well, and then validating that with customer value. So welcome again. So one of the things I wanted to cover is a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully everyone's filling out the audience poll, and we'll see what we get as results from that. But this session is about immersive audio in automotive. And so we're going to be exploring the different ways to translate actual immersive audio content and generate immersive experiences. So currently on the minds of both automotive brands and consumers. That's immersive audio reproduction results from a convergence of multiple technologies and concepts, from multi-channel playback to acoustic oralization of perceived listening spaces, to DSP enhancement of sound reproduction. And so maybe to give a little perspective on immersive audio, maybe some are somewhat familiar with it, not too familiar with it. Immersive audio is a fairly generic description in general for audio formats that add height to a channel-based configuration, and then it evolved into an object-oriented solution, a process which first started to appear about 11 years ago or so, which was then given some criteria is driving new automotive audio speaker architectures, more speakers and overheads and headrest, and finding new ways to use existing architectures. As new content is being created by some of those in this industry with immersive audio theater format of 5.1, where you have left, right, center, left surround, right surround, and subwoofer. With the object-oriented application of immersive audio, this opens up greater possibilities, not only to translate content delivered in those formats, but also to accommodate new approaches, perhaps personal sound zones, unconventional speaker layouts. Maybe we'll talk about that. Maybe there's no speakers in the doors anymore for a car. And it also opens the door perhaps for advanced driver assistance systems, the ADAS systems, where we can maybe put directional sounds anywhere. So what I'll we'll keep reminding everyone that there is an audience poll to fill out if you can. So please let me know if there's any questions on that. What I'd like to do is maybe introduce next a little bit about APEI. And so if I could see the slides I'm going to choose a different one perhaps. There we go. There we go. So one of the things I'd like to cover briefly is some of the pillars that exist for the AES APEI, so that everyone's aware of that. We have a voice and DSP, supply chain and sourcing, and modeling and measurement, as well as product management, artificial intelligence, machine learning, business management, and the one today, automotive audio. Today we've had a few past events that you can look at online at the Audio Product Engineering Institute.org. If you look at the events page, you can find past events and review the videos of those. And today we have what we think will be a part one of a part two series in immersive 3D audio, and we have a few other events coming up planned later in the year and into next year, which will culminate in a APEI automotive audio track at the AES's Automotive Conference in Dearborn, Michigan in June of 2022. So with all that said, I'll ask our administrator if we have a way of looking at the audience poll at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and you can take us off the slides if that's fine with you. And we can maybe see what the poll results are if there's a way to do that. Please let me know. And if not, we'll keep looking for the results throughout the presentations. If I open it up, I'm not sure if we have results yet, so I'll keep looking for that and find a way to bring that into the conversation. So without much more ado, I'm going to let one of our experts begin, and that would be Matias. And we'll go ahead and start with Matias. And keeping in mind, you can put your questions into the chat as a question and answer. We can answer those perhaps throughout, but we do plan to do that at the end and concentrate on that. And then we'll see what we can find out from our interaction through that. So I'll go ahead and let Matias begin. And welcome again, Matias. Please go ahead and bring up Matias's his slides, and we'll go ahead and begin then. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. And we'll see if we can get my slides
there we
up. Over. Let me just go back to the very beginning here. We're spoiling it.
There we go.
So, immersive sound and immersive audio is a huge topic, and so much to say. And Andreas and I will cover maybe a bit of an overlap, but also a bit different aspects. And what I want to talk about is, first of all, a little bit of an introduction to immersive, but then going through sort of system layout by system layout. If we look at a base level car sound system, what can we do there in terms of immersive experiences? And then going up the ladder to premium sound systems. And as Roger mentioned, what can we do with sort of unconventional speaker layouts? And in the end, some parting words on the kind of learnings that I've taken so far from working in this field for a while. And first of all, one of the things, immersive experiences, when we talk about immersive content like Dolby Atmos, of course, it comes to its full potential when you have a setup like the one I have up to the left here. which is a huge. Actually, there is a studio where you mix movies with object-based formats such as Atmos. That's one area, and there you get the full experience. You have a pretty big environment here, and we've actually worked with this studio to make it sound great. On the other end, you have little earbuds like the ones to the right, or smartphones. There's a smartphone here which is intended for gaming. Of course, immersive audio is a huge thing also for mobile devices. The form factor, though, is very different from the first one, right? But our focus, of course, is in the middle down there where you see a car interior, which is on the one side similar to a full-blown immersive setup because it has a lot of speakers. A premium car sound system might have 20, 30 speakers. So in that sense, it's a great foundation. On the other hand, we're in a very difficult acoustic environment. And so we need to treat this acoustically as well and digitally. And the main problem is that you're 4 people. You can be more, you can be less, but let's stick with 4 people in the car, and you're very close to speakers, to certain speakers. So how do you get it to sound like you're in the middle, in the sweet spot of this huge stage that you want to create? And what about the speaker placements? You're limited where you can place the speakers. You have all kinds of problems, plus the reflecting surfaces that actually make it very challenging to get even a stereo setup to sound good in the first place. I know Roger has lots of experience of this, and it's really tricky to get good localization of the various instruments in a mix in a car. So,
those nearby boundaries tend to reflect, and they also move, unfortunately, those boundaries. So it's not quite your typical sound room. So.
No, exactly. And that's what we're then trying to address here with digital signal processing, of course, also a good system design. And, whoops. Let's see, I'm moving strangely through my presentation here. There's something pretty odd here going on, I think.
Are they out of order? Oh dear.
Yeah, they are out of order. This is becoming interesting. I can find the one that was next.
Okay.
Let me just quickly browse.
Go ahead, please. See if you can find it there.
Oh wow, yeah, they've really gone out of order.
Okay.
Yeah, this will be interesting.
Hopefully we can find it. One of the things that we were talking about just before is all the environmental problems in a car. And one of the things that we learned early on in development of just branded audio or just good stereo audio. But in the high frequencies, you can get a lot of time smearing that happens because of the reflections coming in from the right at a higher amplitude sometimes, even though they come later because there's a reflection from the right speaker off of the windshield or the near side window. And then the left comes in, and within the first 10 milliseconds, sometimes you see about 80 or 90% sometimes all of the activity. Are we able to find it there?
What I think I will do is I can share from my computer as I understand this.
That's right. Yes.
It could be that a number of slides just disappeared now from earlier today.
Yeah, if you go ahead and hit the start screen capture up there, you'll be able to do that, and we'll be able to see it here as well.
I think you can see something now. Are you able to see what I'm sharing?
We are. We're seeing it just fine. Yeah, go right ahead. Looks beautiful.
Good. Thank you. So, yeah. So this, what I'm showing here is an interior from a Volvo car with a Bowers & Wilkins sound system option, and what we set out to do, because Volvo tasked us to do it, was to try to simulate the Gothenburg Concert Hall in this car. And anybody who has worked within a car would say that is crazy. Don't try to do that. But we were kind of intrigued by the idea. We thought we had some ideas on how to do it. And in the end, I think we succeeded quite well, actually. And what we did was we started out, well, let me take it step by step first. When you're in a car cabin, like we talked about, these early reflections and so on cause lots of problems in creating any type of immersive experience. And therefore, the first step in any type of immersive experience for a car starts with a solid baseline tuning of the sound system, simply. That is, getting the magnitude response of each of the speakers right, getting the timing between the different speakers right. Then we have sort of a starting point. That's the first thing you always have to do just for a stereo reproduction that is fairly accurate. And the way we go about this at Dirac, and this is similar to what others are doing as well, is that first you go into the car and you measure the sound system. You measure across the different seats in the car, every speaker. You get your plots of the frequency responses. And then with our platform, you set your target response, simply what you want the sound system to be like, a global target response. And you get those filters out that create that for you. Then you go into the car and you fine tune in real time, and you listen to the delay settings and so on. And that is sort of the baseline. And then we go into more of the immersive spatial aspects. But here, before maybe we go into that, I'll actually ask if we could start a little video that shows this tuning process, the first steps of this, because it does play a fundamental role in what comes next.
Yes. And
I've always had a passion for great sound, and I'm lucky enough to work on my passion by creating better sounding systems across the world. My name is Emil, Audio Systems Engineer at Dirac. Let me give you a quick introduction to our intelligent audio platform for automotive. Dirac's all-in-one platform provides everything you need to deliver better sound much faster and easier. The platform is data-driven, so you measure each channel at 16 points per seat to capture the accurate data of the system. Each speaker position and model can be specified. The measurements are practically automatic. As a result, the frequency and impulse response of the whole system at each position is captured. So now you don't need the prototype car anymore, because all the data is in your computer. The data will be the foundation for the next step: sound optimization and spatialization. This is what makes our automotive solution stand out from the rest. Based on decades of research, we've developed patented algorithms to optimize the automotive sound system for enhanced sound quality and to create immersive sound experiences. And you don't have to be a programmer to use the algorithms, because they're all integrated into our platform via the Filter Design tool. Depending on which algorithms or technology you unlock, the functions and capabilities vary. This, for example, is our most advanced cabin sound optimization solution, powered by MIMO mixed phase technology. The technology allows all speakers to work together for sound field control and cabin sound optimization, which was previously possible only in theory. As a result, you get truly high-end clarity, bass performance and staging in every seat. And our filter design tool makes it really simple to do a lot of advanced configuration. Set the target and see the optimization result immediately. This is also cabin sound optimization, but powered by a different technology: impulse response correction. Here, we're looking at center optimization. Once you're done with the optimization and spatialization, you get a clean canvas, free of problems. Then, it's time to paint on it by fine-tuning your signature sound. Fine-tuning will be much easier than before because it's computer-assisted, so there is no blind listening or guesswork involved. The result is predictable, Every adjustment is visualized and audible immediately, which makes a huge difference for the workflow. Once you're happy with what you hear, save and export the file, share or integrate directly into your sound system. With Dirac's intelligent audio platform for automotive, you can now ensure consistent signature sound across car models without hassle. Get great sound in every seat, better, easier and faster with Dirac.
Thank you. And Matias, you may need to share your screen again.
Yes, I will share again here to go back more into the concrete steps. In this video we saw a little bit about the platform that we use, and the steps are always the same. But for a base level system, we start here, where we typically have 4 speakers. You know, it's actually not such a bad start, because for immersive audio we typically want to have more than 2 speakers, right? So it's a good start. The problem is, of course, that we're a number of passengers here, each one located pretty closely to one of the speakers. So typically the staging collapses into one of the speakers too much. So where we start there is we do the sound optimization for each speaker itself, and then we look at the center image. And I'll go into each of these steps, because immersive experiences are about getting enveloped in sound. It's also about the height, the elevation, when we come to more immersive formats and so on. But it all starts with having the basics right. And the center image is where you get most of your information, typically in a car, where you're listening to music or listening to radio, etc. The voice is at the center of attention. So the center image is extremely important for any type of immersive experience. So that needs to be taken care of for these 4 people here. Then we go into the surround sound mode, if we call it that, or immersive sound mode. What are the options available there? I'll talk a little bit about upmixing and so on. And then, as we all know, even though we talk about envelopment and immersion, when we ask consumers about what they feel about great sound, of course, bass is always top of mind. It's all about the bass. So we have to treat that as well, which in base level cars is sometimes a limitation and hard to get really good bass performance. So let's talk a little bit about these aspects. The first one is sort of for you in the audience now that are already in this field, you're used to doing this kind of tuning of each of the speakers. So for a base level system, what you're typically doing is you're using biquad filters to take out the peaks of the frequency response and make it more flat and get kind of tonal balance that you like. And of course, we with our approach, we use a measurement-based optimization of this so that we don't need to spend too much time on that. And once you've done that for each of the speakers and some response as well, then you need to look at the center image. This can be very tricky when you don't have a center speaker. There are approaches, though, where we have one, which is measurement-based again, to make the left and the right speakers sound better in phase at the ears of the 2 listeners, or the right and the left person. Because what you really get if you have a physical speaker there is, of course, that they sum up better at both of these positions. Without the center speaker, you get comb filtering at both of these positions that you have different delays from the left and the right speaker. And so, of course, the stereo image collapses to the closest speaker. If we can make it, these comb filters that are the comb filtering effects that you get from the varying distances of the speakers, if we can get them to disappear, then we're essentially simulating a center speaker. And that's possible to do in a measurement way by having all pass filters. So this can be actually very efficiently implemented also on head units, for example. And then you have a stable center image for both the left and the right passenger. And then we come to the actual surround sound or envelopment immersive sound experience. Regardless of whether you have stereo or multi-channel or object-based formats, this kind of approach works quite well. You have a 4-channel system here, and in theory you could get a great staging when you're in the middle of the car in this gray area. What we want is something like to the right side, where we have good staging in all the seats. So the center image correction creates essentially a center speaker for us. But what about the rest then, the surrounds, so to speak, the ceiling speakers potentially? Well, we use various upmixing techniques. Upmixing is the process of going from one channel format, for example, stereo, to another playback format, such as 4 speakers in the car. You have static upmixing approaches or dynamic upmixing approaches. Static upmixing is in some sense a good choice for a base level system, I would say, because it just uses gains, delays, and possibly phase controls. Thereby, it's also robust to input signal variations because you sometimes have poor radio reception and so on. Whereas with a dynamic upmixer, a content-based dynamic upmixer, that type of upmixer is making it looking at the signal that comes, the input signal, and trying to make decisions on, is this center material? What parts are actually something that should go to the surround speakers? And looking at the correlation properties of the signal. So if it's uncorrelated between the left and the right input signal, for example, it's probably something that should not go to the center speaker. It's maybe something that should go to the surrounds. These kind of decisions are made sometimes on a frequency by frequency basis and over time. So it's dynamic and it's based on the content. There are lots of various upmixers out on the market for this purpose, and they can be used. Static upmixers are simpler and actually in many cases more robust for this kind of entry-level system, not least. Whereas the dynamic ones can also get better performance for sure. So that's the other part you need to do. And as we talked about bass enhancement, what do you do if you simply don't have enough bass extension? Your speakers might not be able to reproduce the lowest frequencies, or the doors might start rattling, create noises, buzz, and so on, rattling. One approach is to use psychoacoustic bass enhancements. Virtual bass, it's also called. This is something that's often used in small speaker systems, such as mobile phones. What the principle here is that we trick the brain, and instead of playing the fundamental tone, we play harmonics. So we shift the bass content up in the frequency ranges where the speaker can reproduce it. And this is called the missing fundamental. When the brain hears a series of fundamentals, or harmonics, I mean, then it will infer that, oh, there must be a fundamental tone here further down, and fills in that itself. So through this principle, we can achieve bass extension beyond what the speakers are actually capable of. This is a technique that is used, like I said, in small speaker systems a lot, but it's getting more common also for cars. And it has certain advantages because it doesn't draw more current, etc. It doesn't create the kind of buzz that you might have otherwise from the door. So that's one way of improving the bass response. But if we now turn our attention to premium sound systems, where the channel layout may look something like this, where you have multiple subwoofers, and you have a center speaker, you have door speakers, and you also have rear surround speakers. then it becomes important to take care of the time domain, because with all these different reflections here, we get a hard time, our human auditory systems have a hard time discerning localization. You can hear this in a lot of car sound systems today, that it's quite hard to hear where exactly is the phantom voice located, where exactly are the different instruments in a mix located. And if we can't even get the stereo system sounding right, when we then go into more advanced formats that we're seeing emerging more and more now, like Dolby Atmos, then we're in trouble. And the reason is that our ears are simply not able to distinguish the correlation between the left and the right ears, or the correlation properties between the signals, the content becomes messed up by the system with all the reflections that are going on. So the sound becomes diffuse. In a way, it becomes maybe a little bit more immersive, becomes immersive in a bad sense. You cannot distinguish where it's located. And immersive sound should, of course, be precise and accurate, even though we can localize it all around you and above you. So therefore, you need to take care of the time domain properties, these early reflections. We have a solution, and this is called MIMO mixed phase correction, where we also co-optimize in the bass region, the multiple bass speakers, because that's another thing. How do you co-optimize the speakers and make sure they play together in a nice way, so that you don't end up, which is quite typical in cars, of having a suck out at, say, for the rear passengers and a bass boost in the front seat, for example, or vice versa. Well, you have to have multiple speakers then, and you have to time them right and make them play well together. This technique takes care of that automatically. Plus, as you can see in this waterfall plot, it reduces the time domain ringing, these ridges and valleys we see here to the left plot, to the down to the left. When you switch on this type of correction, you clean up the ringing in the bass, which of course is critical again in order to then create the impression that was created on this immersive soundtrack that you're listening to. Because otherwise it all gets lost in this linear distortion. And also, as you can see, when you look at the top picture here, the solid black line shows the average frequency response, and the gray cloud around it shows the variations across different seats. What you can see when you go from the left to the right is a straight line in terms of the average, but also much less variations in the bass. So you get the same impression wherever you're seated in the car. Again, very important for a great immersive experience. And never mind that it is a flat target response here, which is typically not what you would use in a car.
Matthias?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually taking advantage of having a microphone, but just one question, because out of curiosity, because this seems very tempting. One typical problem I would usually have is that you, especially in the crossover regions between, let's say, a woofer or mid-range and a tweeter, where they both cover part of the spectrum, they're also like physically distanced from each other, right? So it seems that this type of technology would especially help you for these kinds of problems where you have the crossover, right? And part of the signal is reproduced by one speaker and the other by another, and they're physically dislocated. Yeah. So this is exactly one of the key problems here. Is that okay?
That's quite right. And the thinking behind it conceptually is simply that we have this number of speakers here, and they're positioned at different locations. So how do I make use of them, together optimally, so that they play as good as possible together? Because otherwise you have to sit there and do individual delays for the tweeter, the mid, and the woofer, and the subwoofer, and set the crossover regions right, and so on. And the idea is that let's have an automatic way of fixing all of that, so that we can get rid of these problems, and so that the weaknesses of one speaker can be overcome by another speaker as well. So that's the whole point, exactly. And I'd also like to say that the best approach to immersive sound in a premium system depends a lot on the sound system layout and goals, what you want to achieve. Because what is a great immersive sound experience? I think this is a great question for everybody in this panel and in the audience to think about, because it might be, when we're in a car, music listening is often a background activity. So we also need to be a little bit careful so that we don't create something that actually distracts the driver from driving the car. As long as we're driving, maybe in a few years we're not driving the cars anymore, but as long as we are that, we need to think about that. And what is it we want to achieve? For example, if we just have stereo content, what we might want to achieve is simply the sensation of a bigger space. Like you're at a concert, you have this spaciousness around you. Whereas when you have an Atmos coded track, well, then you want to achieve a different thing. Then you're maybe in a cinema or this large studio that I showed you, where you have speakers above you, and you simply route the sort of typical 7.1.4 setup output to these virtual speakers instead. So I want to show you just a few different approaches here, all based on this sound field control aspect. I talked about it before here, where in this Bowers & Wilkins system, where we worked together with Harman and Volvo, we wanted to create for stereo content and actually an immersive experience by mimicking the sound of a very good acoustic venue, the Gothenburg Concert Hall, which is quite famous for its acoustics. And what we did there is we used sort of a sound field synthesis algorithm. We went into the Gothenburg Concert Hall, measured it, from top to bottom at all the different seats to figure out what is the reverberation pattern in this venue. Why is it that it sounds good, and what are the characteristics of it? We realized that, even with a premium sound system in a car, we cannot perfectly reproduce, each tiny detail. But what are the characteristics that really stick out from this environment? The reverberation time, the correlation properties, the kind of frequency dependent time decay of this environment. And then we went over to the cars and we made similar measurements there. And of course, using the technologies I just described, we can remove the reflections and reverberation to a large extent, not completely, from the car, and then superimpose this characteristic spaciousness from the hall here. And this then was used together with dynamic upmixers as well, to actually, so that you can actually also, a dynamic upmixer tries to, like I said, infer what is, its center image, what is left and what is right, and what is actually room reverberation from the recording. So in this case, we wanted to remove the room reverberation from the recording and add this concert hall reverberation as well. So this is an example where we used what I would call content-based upmixing from Harman, together with context-based, measurement-based upmixing from Dirac to create an illusion of a much larger space, which eventually the conductor of the Gothenburg Orchestra signed off on, actually. So we were all at the big party at that stage, because we never thought it was possible, to be honest. And it was good enough for most people.
Very good.
So the other approach you can take, which is very good for a Dolby Atmos format or just the plain old 5.1 format, it's similar in nature, but the idea here is that you use all the available physical speakers together to combine them into virtual loudspeakers that are located around the car like this. So then you actually get like a two-seat, two-row sofa here, and you have a nice surround sound system here. And this extends to ceiling speakers as well for Atmos content. So here we also synthesized the room reflections, similarly to the Gothenburg Concert Hall, but we created virtual speakers in addition outside of the car. This has been done for Rolls-Royce, for example, actually. And it's similar again in nature that you actually create these virtual speakers, much like we talked about previously, and reduce the variations in the bass. And the nice thing, as we alluded to, is that the virtual speaker actually becomes sort of a super speaker by combining a number of speakers together, overcoming the weaknesses of each one of them. And instead of having to do what you normally would do, this per channel EQ, crossover setting, delays and levels for each of them, some response optimization, upmixing, you get all this in one step. Now you have to have a pretty large number of speakers for this to really work well, though. This is not something that works if you just have 4 speakers and want to make this work for everyone in the car. That we should be clear about as well. So when we think about immersive sound for premium sound systems, there's a couple of points that we want to emphasize. And one thing is that accurate imaging depends on time domain properties. So you cannot just, to create a really good experience, look at the frequency domain. You need to consider the impulse responses of each of these speakers. Because what you want to achieve is really that the sound decouples from the speakers. That's, for me, when you have an immersive experience. You don't hear individual speakers. You hear a sound field that surrounds you, around you, and above you. And with the MIMO control, where we co-optimize the speakers together, and we also get rid of all of these problems in the crossover regions, and we even out seat-to-seat variation. So this is all just to make sure we have a clean sheet of paper to work on, so to speak, to then output the different sources where we want them. And then you can use, or you have to use also for, say, for a standard setup, a stereo setup, the delay and gain tuning is very important between the different speakers. So, for example, achieve your desired phantom center, if you want it straight in front of each of the passengers or from the center of the car. This is a matter of setting the right delays and gains once you're taking care of the phase and magnitude responses. You can also optionally use this type of center image optimization to stabilize, because you often get slightly asymmetrical responses on the left and right seats. And if you're starting with stereo content, you do an optional upmixing to get to a multi-channel, and then you distribute it out to your speakers in those various ways that we talked about here. And there's much to say about upmixing. I mentioned a few things here, like static, dynamic. That's a huge topic of itself, I would say. But of course, if Andreas and his team gets all the music encoded with Dolby Atmos, we don't need the upmixing like that anymore. So that's good. And that's about premium car sound systems. But more and more, we're getting requests, and interesting to hear about from the rest of the audience and so on, about unconventional speaker layouts. Looking at, for example, we did one thing together with Harman a few years ago. We've done several similar concepts where we didn't have any door speakers. In fact, this one, the Infinity Voyager drive, was shown at CES 5 years ago. And there the idea was to have actually a portable speaker that was this little disc here. It had a number of drivers. I think it was 4 or 5. It was put in the center here. It's detachable. And similarly, a detachable subwoofer in the trunk. And how do you get an immersive experience from that? You would think the sound would collapse all into the center of the dashboard. Well, there's a technique that a few of you probably are well aware of called crosstalk cancellation. And if you have more than 2 speakers, we talk about MIMO. This stands for multiple input, multiple output. Crosstalk cancellation. And then again, this speaker co-optimization, because you have a bass down here and you have the speakers up here, and you need to make sure that they match. You don't hear like the bass obviously coming from the back, of course. But crosstalk cancellation, in some sense, if it works perfectly, it would create a pair of headphones for you. And what you're actually doing in a car is you're never going to be able to have perfect crosstalk cancellation. But by increasing the attenuation of the left signal at your right ear and vice versa, so that you're getting a louder left signal at your left ear than at your right ear, then it will shift the stage from the left input channel towards the left side, and therefore you're creating an illusion. Well, actually, you're actually in some sense physically creating a sound coming from the left, and then you do the same for the right. So the idea is you send enhancement signal to one ear, and to the opposing ear you send sort of anti-signals in opposite phase when they arrive at your ears. So this crosstalk cancellation is a way to achieve, and you can do this for more than one person, and that's the thing, when you have more speakers here.
I have a question for you on that, Matias. So you're using crosstalk cancellation. Are you imposing some sort of steering in that as well, and beyond just creating an image, a broader image that's not focused on the center? Are you creating some attempt at something that might be coming from above or behind us with some steering?
Yeah. So actually we've done a bit of both. So if you're only concerned about stereo, actually you don't need to do any steering. Then the crosstalk cancellation itself creates a nice symmetrical speaker setup, because you're never creating a perfect crosstalk cancellation anyway. But of course, the topic here is immersive. So to create rear channels and ceiling channels, then you need to put on some head-related transfer functions, potentially also some reverberation to create the distance and the right localization as well. That's correct.
Was that done with this implementation in the Voyager drive? Or?
With this one, we didn't do any of the HRTFs. We've done on another concept car where you mentioned actually ADAS systems. The topic was really that, to create a bubble for the driver and have directional alerts, and then we would use the HRTFs as well, and even with head tracking to make it even more complicated.
Okay, all right.
So that's an approach you can take, and we've done a few different setups like these. This is just saying the same thing. We kind of devised what I think works quite well is that 4 speakers in the dashboard. And the subwoofer somewhere, or a woofer somewhere in the car. That works quite well. It's, for me, I would say, a base level setup. It cannot compete with a high-end premium branded sound system, because you're not getting the same type of SPL, for example, obviously, with this setup.
We have a directly relevant question in the chat here about how do you manage crosstalk cancellation in the high frequencies?
You do it by, well, you do manage this, first of all, through a measurement-based procedure. That's the first step. And then you need to say there's a certain frequency range where it's important. It actually also, it's pretty important in the bass. And I would say the bass is maybe more problematic in many cases. And the problem becomes then that when the speakers work in opposite phase, you lose SPL. So to get to like, really a high-end sound pressure, that's hard. In the high frequencies, we typically get enough crosstalk cancellation. And when we talk about high frequency, I would say, up to at least 8-10 kilohertz, where you have a lot of cues also for directionality, if you look at the head-related transfer functions.
Okay.
That works once you need to have, 2 speakers per pair of ears, I would say. And then it works quite well. This is also something we do for smartphones, and that works quite well, actually, up to that frequency range.
Okay.
And in order to improve on this base level system, we devised a setup like this with slightly bigger speakers, also 2 of them in the front. Say you go from 50 millimeter to 75, and adding a 2-speaker array for each of the rear passengers, so that they can have a louder level and a better experience. So this is actually a setup that creates envelopment. It has the potential for full, 3D sound with HRTFs on top of it for all the passengers in the car. And you get rid of the door speakers, which, is an interesting setup.
Well, there's another question too in the chat that might be relevant at this point too, and it's more towards base grade system. The question was have you done any at Dirac or anyone to determine what the optimal minimum or maximum number of speakers is for creating some form of surround or immersive environment. Is there a minimum that you mentioned earlier that you don't get too far with 4 speakers, but is there something in between?
I'm not aware of any really sort of, studies that really concluded. And it also, of course, depends on, it's one thing if we do a driver mode, but when we want everyone in the car to have a great experience, I'm not aware of any studies that really concluded anything there.
Right, and that's when you do that driver mode, not that driver mode, but for everyone, you're also creating that room optimization for both the front seat and the back seat, using some of the virtual combinations of speakers to create that consistent experience from front to rear. It's what you had described earlier, I believe. So, okay.
Yeah, and you do have a problem, obviously, in the rear seat if the rear speakers are in the doors, and
oops, have we lost? Looks like we lost Matias there for a moment. So we'll go ahead at this point. Well, we had that one question, and when we regain Matias, we'll bring him back in. We can go ahead and take his slides off our screen for a moment. So when he does come back in, we can. But I'll chat with Andreas for a while. One of the things. One question I'm going to answer right now for someone who asked, we are recording this, and we'll have a video of it available up on the APEI site to watch later at your leisure as well. One of the things that we had planning to do was the poll, and I think we can. I think it can be pushed out as well as read. So if we'll go there, it is. If everyone can see that, that would be good to know. But we had about 5 questions, and the questions that we had were related to the first one was the amplifier. So you can see that here, and I think you can stretch your window a little bit to make more ease of use, and you can select the ones that you want. But today's branded audio architectures mostly, and if you can't see the poll, then you can answer some of this in the chat. But today's branded audio architectures, oops, I've lost it myself here. Hang on a second. Today's branded audio architectures mostly rely on a dedicated amp, signal processing. How is that going to change in the next few years? The signal processing is going to, amplifier stays relevant, signal processing is consolidated in the head unit, processing offloaded to central compute units. And we're getting some answers right now. Right now, we're seeing a lot of responses that the processing will be offloaded, but also then signal unit, it's also almost not equally, but close to signal processing consolidated in the head unit. I'm assuming we can keep this open if we go to the next one, because I think some of that is relevant. If we open up the second one that's in the list, is how soon will streaming become mainstream in the car, and their choices are less than 2 years, which I think may be the case, but 2 to 3 years, 3 to 5, greater than 5. So if you can see that particular question, please go ahead and respond to that and let us know what you think. And I'll check the chat here just to see if we have any questions. 2 to 3 years seems to be the lead at the moment, but I think that's pretty accurate. We got a few saying it's already here. So it may be a battle between what it's already here in most cases, and it's going to come in the next 2 to 3 and now 5. But it's, I think the consensus becoming that it's already here, that we've already met that streaming becomes mainstream. So that's a good answer there. We'll keep that one open too. Next up was connectivity. Let's bring that one up if we can. And I'm waiting for that one to show on my screen. So I'm going to wait for it to show up here. There we go. How has connectivity of cars, is it going to evolve? And this, I guess the question is, are we going to project what's on the phone in your car? Are you simply going to tether to the car itself using tether to the phone? Users are leveraging private data plan for cars with a second SIM, and a car data plan provided by the car itself, the OEMs. Is that, I think that one's available for us to answer. So we'll wait for some responses on that. And this will lead us into some discussions a little bit later with Andreas, and hopefully we'll get Matias back. So at the moment, we're seeing phone projection is somewhat higher than the others, but the car data plan, it would be great if the OEMs gave us a car data plan that didn't cost as much as our data plans. That would be nice. And let's see. Yeah, it looks like we're in between a phone projection and a car data plan at the moment. So we'll keep going that. But I think in general, we're leading with the car phone projection. Let's move to a question that was probably relevant a little bit earlier, is where should the center channel be when we're in immersive audio or even in surround sound? Because this is can be personal, can be less personal. Is it going to be in front of you, or is it going to be off to the center, out on the hood, perhaps, if you can manage to get it to seem like it's a larger space? So if we look at the center channel question, that would be good to do next. If we can bring that one up, and I'm waiting for that one to load on my end, so I'll wait for some answers on that. And this can be somewhat philosophical too, not just a question of preference. Is where should it be? Do I want to feel like I'm in the concert hall, or do I want to feel like it's my own personal space? And this may evolve, obviously, as we get into more personal sound zones. And there's Matias.
Now I'm back.
Well, we jumped into some of the poll questions, so you missed the fact that I think the amp is going to no longer be relevant. It's going to be mostly in a central compute unit or in the head unit itself. Streaming is considered almost mainstream now, or within the next couple of years. Connectivity seems like we're going to be continuing to project our phones to connect, but there may be some people are opting for SIM cards, but maybe the OEMs will provide that service as part of it. Now we're talking about center channels, and I'm not seeing the results yet on that, but the question is whether it is in the front of the speaker, the listener, or in the center of the car, which is relevant to some of the things you were talking about there at the end about virtual center channels. I don't see that one coming up yet, so we'll keep waiting for that. There we go. We're getting some results now. There we go. And we'll wait for some of the results to come in. This may be a battle. This is somewhat philosophical sometimes, or it's preference based, but it is a classic question. So we'll see what.
Can I add a perspective on that? I think it might depend also on the content type or your mode of listening. If you're talking about 100%.
Well, wait, give it a moment. There may be some more responses. There we go. Yeah, it's just based.
It was just the first person, right?
Yeah, they 100% agree with themselves. That was good. So I think that was what I was saying too, Matias, is the content or speaker or modes. If you have the ability to create your own space, then yeah, you want to have it in front of you, and you listen to it yourself in the way that you want. Or if you want to try to create that larger space that you were talking about.
Exactly.
It's perspective. And the good news or the bad news is we have options in our modern audio systems. So it's about a 50-50 split here. That's surprise.
This is one of the constant debate.
Center images. I was just saying from one of our poll members, we talked about center channel, but we should be talking about center image. But I believe that's what we're talking about, is center image. Hopefully that's how everyone understood it. And thanks for the chat for helping us out there. One more question, then we'll and I apologize, Matias, if we cut you off before the end of your final presentation, but.
I think I was done. I'm not sure where it was.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's good. Let's do the last question we have in our poll is about which other immersive content forms besides music would be relevant for cars? Podcast, radio play or audio-visual, games. There's three choices: podcast, AV, or games. What would be another content form besides music that is relevant? And then once we finish with that, we'll go ahead and while we're waiting for that to be filled out, see if it's always the first one. So there was a question here. Can we comment on the seat-based speakers like the B&W system in the BMW iX or Flexon's approach? Is there any comment from either Matias or Andres about speakers-based, the seat-based speakers in the Bowers and Wilkins? Any comments? I think it's somewhat of a trend to put speakers in headrests and into the into the seats themselves to create one of those speakers that you could use in your virtual design of a sound field.
Yeah, I guess the way I interpret the question, it's really about the seat shakers. Yeah, like the sensible shaking seat. That's how I understand. Like it's in BMW, you have, I think, shakers, and then Flex Sound. I think it's also around sensory effect of audio, where you have a vibrating seat for you.
Okay.
That's how I understand it.
Okay.
Comments.
Well,
from what I know and heard. Yeah, I'm not what I've heard is that the response from users is some really like it, right? Some don't. Yeah. So it's usually good, and then there's all differences in between. So I think it's maybe one other where when you would create such a question, you would maybe get a different responses, and which means that there's different tastes. Like there's vanilla ice cream and chocolate ice cream, right? So
there's also some practical aspects of it too. And, from our experience, we've implemented those types of systems ourselves at JJR, and there can be annoyances like anything else. Putting a speaker in a trim panel or something, that's annoying if you perceive that it's there. So the goal is to make sure that the perception is bass and not vibration necessarily, or maybe a little bit, but not to the extent that you feel the vibration more than you sense the bass that's being trying to be produced. And that comes with integration, which is always our problem in cars, is getting the correct integration so you don't localize on a problem rather than localizing on the spatial impression that you're trying to get. So it really is a question of making sure that it doesn't distract from what you're supposed to, so that the psychological break doesn't happen. Because when that happens, you're done, and then you need to make sure that you fix that hole. So going back real quickly to our immersive content, it looks like mostly podcasts, but I think that may be what we're experiencing right now. But audio visual seems to be very close to that. Games seems to be a trend, I would say. And that may be the case. And there was another comment in the chat about vocal concert. I'm not sure if that's the case. That may just be the same as a radio play. So that was our poll. Thank you. And that'll give us a little bit of food for thought. What I will do is probably then transition into what we have available to talk about next, which will be from Andreas, and you'll be discussing some of the aspects of Dolby Atmos. And first of all, I think Matias gave us a very good perspective on the car environment, how you have to control it before you start trying to enhance it, and to get it right, so that you don't have audio that distracts. You have audio that is natural and pleasing. Because I get that question a lot. Is having a broader stage image distracting to a driver? No, not if it's correct. If it's correct, you're comfortable, and it means it's so. And then when you put in something like ADAS to grab someone's attention, then you can make it very jarring and draw their attention on purpose. And so making it correct and larger, at least in my opinion, is a good thing. It's not a distraction. It's more pleasant, more natural. And if we can do that, and then add to it and create a beautiful experience. And that's what we should do as a goal. And I think that was set up beautifully by Matias. And thank you. Andreas, I'm going to transition over to you. And I think at this point, we'll have a video that we'll be playing in a moment. But you're going to get into some of the spatial objects, use of objects to create music and reproduce an environment and reveal the details that provide great spatial clarity and depth. So you're going to be talking about that briefly, but let's go ahead. And again, everyone, if you want to put questions and answers into the chat, we will watch those. So go ahead and if we can, roll the first video for Andreas. Okay, go right ahead. And we'll see if your slides work for you. And that's, go ahead, we can switch that.
Yeah,
there we go.
Right.
All right, very good.
Okay, let's see if this works. Just from look at the stuff, it's scrambled as well.
Okay,
so I would probably start.
Go right ahead. There's the share. Capture screen. So if we can go ahead and take these slides off, and then we'll go to your slides from your computer, and then we'll go ahead and move along with that. And sorry again if we've scrambled.
No worries.
There we go.
Sorted.
Oops.
All right.
And
do you see the right screen?
I see Dolby Atmos for cars. Yes. Your first
That's
slide.
what you should. Okay, good. And then I will just to make sure. Yeah, I know. Well, trying to manage this.
Yeah, I like that. So I like the infinite screen. That's good.
Yeah. Some experimentation as we speak. Okay, so this should hopefully work.
Okay.
So well, thanks a lot first for inviting me and having me here. And thanks Matias and Roger for the lead into the topic. The 30 seconds that you just saw are kind of like the teaser of what I'm going to talk about. The quick, you got some visual cues of what my talk is about already. So essentially, if you paid attention to those 30 seconds, you can switch off and relax. But essentially, that's the gist of it, if you will. I'm going to take certainly a different approach, a complementary approach, on what immersive audio means. And where I'm really coming from is from a content perspective. So talking about Dolby Atmos, why do we do it? Explain what Dolby Atmos is, just briefly. Of course, I assume people roughly know about the technology as such, but more talk about, well, why does it matter for cars? What about music? Because that's the use case, that we're really talking about here, is that at least for the foreseeable future, in the next few years, I should say, music listening is going to be much more important than AV content. So we'll talk about a lot around music. I'll also talk about, when we talk about content, I also talk about music production and explain the approach for audio objects, as you say, and how to use objects in immersive audio, and give also a little hands-on, so you understand how that actually is working from a artistic perspective. And then I'm going to round it out, of course, to talk about, well, how does it actually tie it back into the car? How is Atmos in cars actually going to work? How is that going to look like from a system perspective? And I'll round it out with a few challenges that I think I observed in working in this industry now for a couple of years, and especially as it relates to lighting up immersive audio or Atmos for cars specifically. So that's the rough idea. And then I'll try to keep an eye on the chat window, and I'll try to keep an eye. But I think Roger is doing a great job in weighing in on occasion. So
I'll jump in when something comes up. But everyone feel free to jump in there, and we'll answer them in real time if we need to. So it'd be fun. So thank you.
Correct. All right.
But I also, the relevance of what we were talking about earlier, hopefully that has some impact on everyone's opinions too about immersive audio, but also maybe prompt a lot of questions on how do I do this myself? How do we actually get this to work? So, and content is part of that. So thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So fasten your seatbelts. I'm going to be quick to make sure that we have enough time for discussion also. So first, just back what Dolby Atmos is. So it really comes from a content perspective first. So it's a reimagination of saying, hey, how do I create content? How do I mix content? And the introduction of audio objects was one of the things here, the paradigm shifts. So mixing into space, using audio objects to mix into space without the limitation of mixing towards a specific channel format. And then certainly the other one is that overhead speakers or a full 3D was created. So that's the key aspects of it, and I think that's pretty well understood. So I'll not spend much time on it. A few ideas of how is the market adoption of Dolby Atmos as such. I think. Here's a perspective of like 2014. This is kind of like a snapshot in time when we think about, well, what's the Dolby Atmos adoption as an ecosystem when we tie together like for home theater, how do we create it? Where's the content coming from? How do we distribute it? What's the services, the channels? And how can I experience it? Yeah. So what devices and brands do I have? Yeah. And that was kind of like 2014 when we lit up Atmos into the market. And the fast forward to, I think this is last year. Yeah, it really filled up. Yeah, and I think that's like a testament to saying, oh yeah, well, we're in a great situation that we can leverage. There's a lot of content. There's lots of services. There's a whole bunch of devices landscape that is available today, and that's of course a great testament, I think, to the technology and the design of it. Now, a few more stats just for like making sure that you have an idea of what's happening roughly. So there's plenty of movie titles, TV episodes. Regional markets, well, for example, China, of course, is very important. That's one of the biggest markets, if you will. And then there's also new, or relatively new. So there's live sports over streaming and even broadcast. There's video games. There's a fair number of titles, and Xbox, for example, as one gaming platform, PC. So a lot of things happening there. A few more numbers on partnership. So hardware manufacturers. I talked about services already. Content partners. That's of course, content is king in a way. So that old saying still holds. And a few more numbers on device adoption. So you have like a vast, as mentioned, there's a vast number of devices out there that are Dolby Atmos enabled and accessible to consumers. So if you can't count it all up in terms of numbers, it's probably meanwhile scaling into billions of devices, probably. So okay, so let's go from here. Let's talk about music. Oh, is there a question?
No, we're fine. Thanks. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Good. So let's talk about music. I think most of what was said so far holds, of course, true for Atmos being the immersive sound format associated with picture. But a couple of years ago, we changed or we added to the idea of saying, well, at Dolby Atmos also works for music. Yeah, so we've been experimenting with that ideas for a few years, and a couple of years back we formed when we had the proof for ourselves and got comfortable with it, we engaged also with the music content industry and the large players there, and we formed partnerships with the likes of like Universal Music, for example, and to really say, hey, does the Dolby Atmos format as such also add something to music without picture, to really for music listening. And you probably have seen some advancements here as well, but so I'm going to talk about what that actually means. And of course, music is a big emotional thing. People are emotionally attached to music, and it evokes lots of emotions. So it's a really important thing, and we want to get it right. And that's the reason, I think, why we're also talking here today for cars, because music obviously has a really close connection to being one of the number one. Well, it's probably the number one entertainment use case in cars. Yeah. So Dolby Atmos music is the reason why I'm talking here today. Okay. Okay. So to give you a sense of where we are in the rollout, there's lots of artists, mainstream artists, independent artists across the book, all genres available. Here's just a few ideas of where we are. There is free global streaming services enabled with Dolby Atmos music today. The most recent edition was Apple Music, which in many ways changed conversations and changed the picture quite a bit, and I can discuss that a little later too. We have Amazon Music HD, has Dolby Atmos music since a while, as well as Tidal. So those are the three that are enabled today. And then there's also other services, for example, Hungama in India, or Hungama in the Arab countries, or Vibe in Korea, that have also embraced Dolby Atmos music. So we have a pretty good traction there. What it really means from a content perspective, and again, I might tie this back also to the change with Apple Music. We have seen a tremendous uptick with Apple Music coming to play and giving it to their across their entire device landscape, and to all Apple Music subscribers. They now get Dolby Atmos music. So many of you who have an iPhone of a somewhat recent generation, you can enjoy Dolby Atmos music today if you have an Apple subscription. So many people may not even know this, right? But there's lots of use cases around, and that really has also changed the conversation when it comes to the content industry, because since the adoption of with Apple Music, it has really stipulated lots of studios and artists to say, hey, I want to release in this format too. So this is why,
There's a relevant question, I think, in the chat that I think you'll probably address. And you started with Tidal, then you showed Apple. What are the fidelity? What kind of fidelity can we expect in streaming coming up? Since and our poll said streaming is here now. It's the number one thing that we do most of the time. So
yes. The fidelity in the sense of compression, I assume. That's
how quickly, what kind of bit rate, I guess, is it maybe related to that? But can we expect?
Yes, I have this later, but of course it's we're using for streaming format. It's the Dolby Digital Plus joint object coding technology for streaming that we're using, and that's streaming at 768 kilobits per second mostly. But there's also an adaptive bitrate switching if needed for streaming conditions. But that's the bitrates that are being used, and what that means from a fidelity perspective. I mean, of course, it's audio codecs, it's subjective, but according to our listening tests in critical listening conditions, that usually scores in the excellent range.
Yeah, and then the other part of that was compression. So dynamic range is still trying to be preserved, or is that something that is a trade-off in parts of more channels, higher fidelity, or is there limitations?
No, it's a audio codec behind that,
Oh,
and
okay.
dynamic range is not. That's full artistic intent. What has been created. So no compromise with dynamic range in that sense.
Yes, that's what I want to make sure was understood. So that's good. Thanks. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Good. All right. Moving on. So how is music production in Dolby Atmos actually working? So a bit of hands-on even. So I'll first talk about the concepts, and then in a few minutes we'll try again something new. Yeah, that means we'll play back an experience with binaural. So I think if you don't have it yet, get your headphones out because the hands-on later will be played back in binaural. And I'm very curious to see how this holds up over this platform. So, but that's an experiment and maybe a poll question even later. Yeah. So,
okay, good.
So get your headphones ready. We'll do that in 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Good. Music production. You saw a few pictures. So the content production is done in a mixing studio, like the ones in I have a couple of pictures too. So you have a Dolby Atmos enabled mixing room with a workstation. You're mixing in your Atmos format, which means you have a 712 audio bed. So you can imagine that as a bus, if you will. Yeah. So an Atmos immersive bus or channel-based immersive bus, and you're overlaying up to 118 audio objects. And that together with the metadata of where those audio objects are placed, that all goes together. And first to monitor, it's going into a so-called Dolby Atmos renderer. So that's used for, on one side, monitoring. So you can monitor during your production. You can also monitor on headphones. So you can have your studio on a laptop, if you will. And pre-listen and create in binaural. And then also the same Dolby Atmos renderer is then later used to create the output assets. Yeah, so that's essentially the print master, the Dolby Atmos master file, which contains all the mix, and that can be used for archiving. And there's ADM B-Wave or ADM B-Wave meets, that's a standardized format done by I think EBU, ITU in collaboration. We're using that standard as an archive format, so it's very transportable across different DAWs and future use cases. And then you can also, out of the Atmos renderer, also derive other, let's say, mix downs, channel-based deliverables if you need to. Yeah, so you could down mix into, let's say, 5.1 representation or a stereo representation if you have a need, or also create a binaural that you could also check for, exchange for things. And that's also actually what we've done with the binaural demo later. I'm going to show you. So that's the overview of the workflow. It's integrating with the most commonly used DAWs in audio video and also music production. Just give you some of those here. Here's a couple of pictures from music studios that are set up for Atmos music production, and you see some of the world's leading ones depicted here. But it hasn't to be this way. Yeah, it's also working with something that's more reasonable, or also my own room probably looks like one of those. So it's somewhat scalable of course you have to have minimum speaker requirements, but if you measure and calibrate your studio properly, you're also able to create Atmos music mixes in such kinds of rooms. So beyond that, there's also a good developed ecosystem of partner tools. You could imagine that for let's say immersive productions with 3D audio, you need also effects plugins, for example. Effects plugins for reverb, let's say, or other effects, and just showing a few of these, like sample. There's also like sample libraries developing. There's monitoring solutions, control systems, In some cases, there's even dedicated loudspeakers that are like optimized for Atmos overhead speakers, for example. Yeah, so quite a nice developed ecosystem by now. And here's a few more just screenshots, so you get a sense for how the UIs look like in a production environment. So this is kind of like depicting a production environment in one box. Yeah, so you could create your binaural rendering or work in the train, if you will, with some of those tools. Some of these, like in this case, Pro Tools has a native panner, so you don't have to rely on something else. It's a native integration of Pro Tools. Same with Nuendo. Nuendo has a native integration of the Atmos or from an immersive panner, if you will. In Nuendo case, for example, they even have a integrated Atmos renderer, even. Yeah, so they are also doing that in one box. The tool that we're providing from our end also is this Dolby Atmos renderer software that I explained. So that's used for monitoring and writing the master file. This is how it looks like, and there's going to be in the hands-on later. We'll see how that works. There's also for the specifics of music, where we're adopting or changing actually or adjusting, refining our tools to make sure that we also are not just producing sound for AV, yeah, or for the picture, but really take care of, hey, these tools are now developing really towards music specifically. So we also created a music panel plugin that specifically is developed for music in the sense of like, oh, it makes sense, or it's aligned to tempo, yeah, or it can do movements according to tempo. It can have different types of automated fades or movements of certain objects and things like that. And with that, I wanted to we've also created a bit of an effort originally I was planning to do this live, but there was too much risk, so we pre-recorded this. So in the next 5 minutes, we're going to play a video that shows you how Dolby Atmos music production actually is working with all those tools. And if you have your headphones on, meanwhile, it is a binaural demo. Yeah, so you would the speaker. So apologies in advance. The guy. This had to be done in a hurry a little bit, but the voiceover is not up to latest and greatest production requirements. But the music that you're going to hear is the binaural output from the renderer. So that holds up pretty nicely, and the voiceover was nicely done by a colleague of mine, so kudos to him. So I think with that we can roll.
Okay. Yeah, this should be a good hands-on experience with rendering some Dolby Atmos content, correct? Okay, yeah, all right. So if we're ready, let's go ahead and roll that video.
Hello, my name is Georg Meyer. I'm a content creation specialist at Dolby, and today we're gonna have a look at how to mix Atmos music inside Pro Tools. First, we're gonna listen to an Atmos mix that's already finished.
It's all just a storm in a teacup. Oh, I can't help but wonder why we do this to each other. Oh, before I go off the rails, for one more candid moment.
Great. We have some stereo stems here, some mono stems, and we can work with the plugins that we are already used to in stereo, like our basic compression, EQs, and so on. But we also have access now to immersive effects, like immersive reverb, or even immersive delays that we can split all around the room. Now, let's start with a blank session. drag and drop some stems. I have 4 mono stems, and we're gonna create a little Atmos mix out of them right now. At first, choose an object that you want to route it to and activate it. That's it. Now we're gonna play it and see in the renderer if everything is right. Great, but it sounds boring, so let's position them, starting with the vocal. Here, we're gonna pan it wherever we like it. Let's have a listen.
Before I go off the rails, one more candid moment. A truth seems to find its way.
We can even apply some size to it.
Before I go off the rails.
But let's position it in the front with some elevation. Now we have a bass, but I like the position, so I leave it. Now we have 2 guitars. I want to split them up to the left side here with some elevation. Great. Now we have the other guitar.
Before I go off the rails. One more.
Awesome. Now let's create some movement. I can simply change the automation mode here, grab the object and play the Proto session and move it.
Before I go off the rails. One.
Do it with another object too.
Before I go off the rails. One more candy. Before I go off the rails. One more candid moment.
Awesome. We are done. We have created an Atmos mix with 4 little objects, but now we need to export it. Simply choose the section that you want to export, go to File, Bounce Mix, and here we have the option to choose Dolby Atmos 80 MB WAV file. We are also able to do it offline, so bounce it. It's faster than real time. And we are done. Here you can see the mix that we've created. Now let's see if everything is right. Go to inside the renderer and open the print master. So you can see it right here on the top. I can press play.
Before I go off the rails.
And listen to our new created Atmos music track. Thank you for listening.
Okay, very good.
Right.
That was a nice hands-on experience for rendering the video of the audio. Now, that's the next question. How is this delivered to a car? typically? You were talking about streaming potentially. Is there any other format that it's usually presented to you in a car? I mean, how do I get it as a listener, or how do I content that as an OEM who is going to ask another tier one or provider to put that into my car?
Right.
What do I have to plan on?
Exactly. That's what I'm going to cover in my next session.
Oh, okay, good.
Or next piece. So thanks for the lead-in, and I hope the screen share is back.
Yes, she is. Very good.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. All right. So Dolby car experience. So how does that actually work, and how do we deliver that into the car? Now, as mentioned before, I mean, it's really about a music ecosystem. So we covered music creation, we covered content distribution. That means we're really relying on streaming services to stream into the car. That's kind of like also the background or context for one of those questions, right? How much is streaming services or streaming into the car already mainstream as of today? And we believe that with the current state of where the industry is and emerging patterns, connected cars and what have you, it's really the right time to do this now. Yeah. So music streaming services have Atmos music available now, and streaming into the car is becoming more prevalent, and that means we can really we can really start now a playback experience in the car, and extending, so to say, device ecosystem that we're used to with Dolby Atmos, and add the car as a playback device. That's what it is about. And in a sense, the car cabin, I would claim, is a great environment to do that, because you as nicely outlined with Matias, you have a fixed speaker arrangement. You know where everyone is sitting, so you can do a lot of the work and the optimization that Matias was describing to say, oh, I can use this more sophisticated content and the immersive delivery chain, and now optimize that experience with the tools and the like those that Matias explained. Yeah, so it's really, that's where I'm really coming from, to say it's a complementary perspective. I'm talking about the content and bringing a new experience into the car, and Matias sort of makes sure that it's rendered optimally. Yeah, so I think that's where our technologies or our proposition really nicely fit together. Yeah.
Okay.
Question?
Yeah, I have. Well, the question is then, today I plug in. I've got either CarPlay or something in the car. Not necessarily CarPlay. It could be the Android Auto. How am I going to find my? Or do I go to one of the many streaming services that exist that you just mentioned? Do I get Dolby Atmos from that? And if I don't have the content in the car, if I'm someone who's developed a car that doesn't have it yet, what will my experience be? I mean, or will it, if the streaming is not ideal, what is my experience? You know, some of the problems that we have in cars are age old in terms of reception and playback of source material that is not quite optimal. So is there any additional challenges here beyond what we typically have for the developers that we need to consider? Or?
So what we demand, or what we require, is for the actual bit streams to actually be available in the car, of course, to make the best job. Yeah. And as of today, CarPlay, Android Auto are not supporting Dolby Atmos stream delivery into the car. So we're working on that, but that door currently is not yet immediately open. The car OEMs that we have in the pipeline, and I think Lucid, for example, is one example that's public information, right? So they have a direct connectivity into the car head unit, so they have direct delivery into the car. So we're really talking about, at this point, if we're talking about next year, and launching services and accessibility for consumers next year, we are really talking about the streaming service needs to be natively integrated, if you will, with a direct connectivity into the car.
Okay. I think I just got that question in the chat, so you answered it. It says here, how does Dolby do it with Lucid Air? Is that relevant to what you just mentioned? I think it is.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I guess, Matias, from your point of view, what have you experienced? I mean, you've implemented immersive audio in cars. Your experiences, where is the content coming in that you've dealt with? Either if it's a legacy of stereo with ambience or 5.1, then the height that we were listening to in the demo, in the rendered material, how do we work with that, and how have you experienced it as well, Matias?
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on a good point, right? It's the cars of today mostly still, of course, are focused on stereo content. So the availability is still limited, of course, but that's all changing. So, and we had, 10, 15 years ago when also multi-channel content was being possible to play back over DVDs inside the car, for example.
Yeah.
But that was slightly different. So I guess that's the next step, right? To actually get it, because I think this is the key. If we're supposed to be able to deliver it, we have to have it easily accessible in the car, right?
Right, and it looks like Scott's got a question here. This is Scott Leslie from the APEI.
Hey, thanks, Roger. And this is great great stuff, guys. You go on for a couple more hours, as far as I'm concerned, but I'm not sure our audience will let us do that today. So one kind of question central what we're just talking about, and then I've got a kind of an off in the left field question for you after that, so be prepared. But the first one is, I don't know much. What about upmix stuff? You guys in the home theater have Dolby, I believe it's rebranded Dolby Surround again, as a way to take whatever you got and make it as immersive as possible. So I would assume that processor, those algorithms will be available to the automotive industry as well.
To be, I mean, not appropriate language. So, but to be blunt, it's not really my cup of tea in a way. But what I mean is, of course, we have those algorithms, but there's many sophisticated upmix algorithm available. Yeah, and I'm not sure if we need yet another one just because it's from Dolby. Yeah, so really my message here today is, yeah, sure, we could offer it, and let's talk more about it if people are really interested in it. But my key message really is the difference we're making, is in the content. Yeah, and the key message is in reproducing creative intent. And what we're bringing here, and that's, I think, the offer, to the entire car audio industry here, is that we're up-leveling that content we're bringing to the car, because stereo is just one way to do it, and of course it's a great format, but immersive audio, for me at least, is really defined by what's the artist's intent and what your creatives do with it, and I think that's what we want to light up. That's what we want to deliver into the car, and that makes audio in the car matter again, right? And that's really the value we bring. So in that sense, we can talk about Dolby upmix processing. Of course, we have it, but it's not my key message here.
No, I get it's about content today. And Roger, if I go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say that it's a question of there's a challenge to implement it. Is the juice worth the squeeze? And it typically, that's the answer is yes when it's implemented correctly. And then once you feel and this should be a more seamless integration, I think, than we've had before, where we had to put a silver shiny disc in, and then right now we still do put USB sticks in, even though streaming and a cloud service is probably going to become very quickly a way of life. But I think the challenges are worth the what we're trying to do for making what is more an accurate experience in a car, and we don't want to create a ping pong effect like stereo could, but we want to create a natural atmosphere. And I think that is the goal, and that helps create that emotional connection that people want from a car. And that's why they'll buy this one or buy that one, or that's why the listener and the purchaser is going to be influenced, I think, at this point. But it still needs to have some key steps made to get it fully implemented. And I think the rest of that is finding ways to get there. Go ahead. Yeah.
So the other question I had is about content, and it's a little, like I said, a little left field here, guys. And that is, where is the state of automotive companies in terms of inserting, let's say, object-based content for other than entertainment purposes, for communication? Like, can I have a better cell phone call because you can put the object in the right spot? Do I have to say, is that you, Andreas? What? Can you say that for the 8th time in a row? I mean, we're all tired of that. And alarms and alerts. I mean, there's all kinds of verbal, I think, opportunities for this.
No, it's actually very relevant, I think, Scott.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I love object stuff and what it can do. And if we look outside of entertainment, what's possible, and where are you guys going with that?
Yeah, because is what we know is automotive audio is not just sound. It's not music. It's also active noise control, and it's safety. And so,
and I mean,
in car communication as well. Go ahead, Matias.
Yeah, exactly. The communication use case, like a setting like this, I think spatial audio has a great use case. We're sitting more and more in various kinds of video conferences, and sometimes you're commuting while you're in that call. And for sure, there's a huge opportunity to have better conferencing experience where I can locate that Andreas is over there, Scott is over there, and Roger is behind me. Or that makes a lot easier to discern who's talking and so on. So that's one use case. The other one that you alluded to, I think, is relevant ADAS, where you have, the alerts coming from an appropriate direction once, it's being detected that, here in Sweden, we have these elks walking, running over the streets or roads when we drive, and it would be great to have a warning alert then from the right direction ahead of time, so I can, steer away from the danger. And that kind of experience is starting to come. We're seeing some requests from OEMs on that for sure. I think that's a great opportunity.
Yeah, and that kind of there's always a haptic feedback these days in most new model cars, where there's a haptic feedback when there's an adjustment that needs to be made. But with a proper audio cue, it actually makes it more safe, because then, and what we find is when we have cars that are good at helping us drive, we drive more. So that means more people will be driving cars. So it's part of a win-win for the industry, but also then you can go back to listening to something pleasant and not the elk sound. Yeah, well, good. That's real good. Any more jarring questions, Scott? Because you're good at jarring questions.
No, that's good for me.
Well, I think the idea there is to make it jarring too. Is that when it's important, it needs to be made very clear. And when you have objects, you can do that. I like the idea of a conference call as well, because one of the beautiful things about objects is that you can pick the things that make that sonic event important to it being accurate. And because a lot of the traditional recording methods were, from even mono to stereo, is where you had to cut out part of an instrument so that you could actually not have an overload of bass when you've got a piano and a bass playing. And with multi-channel, we knew that was possible. When you have 5 channels, you could put a full band of the bass in one and a piano in another. But now we have the ability to take that entire object, which could be a piano, it could be a voice, it could be a flute, and putting it where it should be without any colorization. And I think that's the value of it. And it's just a matter of experience it without too much of a headache, because the headache was always getting the content in and being able to play it back.
Well, let's go back to the product managers, in the auto business, the car brands. I mean, you go down to, you want the consumer to have the greatest experience, and they come down, hey, let's make a cell phone call. You will not believe how great a cell phone call. And you go, wow, that's good. I'll buy your car. What was it again?
Yeah, in this use case,
these things are really big advantages, and take advantage of what you guys can do. for immersive. It's not. I don't know if it's immersive content. It's just really, really accurate content for the automotive.
Yeah, you could call
industry.
it that, but in the end, it is clarity and accuracy. And immersive is a method, and virtual
Yeah, good point, Roger.
creating virtual sound field is a method, and content is important. I mean, speaker content and architectures become important, but knowing how you can control them is the best part of that. So,
Isn't that a great sort of encouraging question for the audience to bring home to their respective companies to think about? Because I think here we're painting a picture of opportunities you have. You can actually, with coming sound systems, generate sound for a very distinct location around you, anywhere essentially in space. That opens up a new set of opportunities, new set of use cases, and I think that's, music is obviously one, sure, but I think there are many other use cases when we start thinking about this, and that's where I think the people in this audience can be very creative, hopefully, in finding.
Yeah, and just see how it can be done. That's one. Okay, I have the opportunity, and then I just need to dream up another way of doing it that is even better than what we're doing now. And I agree with that completely.
And I think you need to be a content architect, given what's happening in the automotive business, Roger. We have with the assisted driving and self-driving cars. I don't know if the content will keep up with the self-driving car. What kind of informational content does a self-driving car need? But it's going to need something special.
Well, it does need to know the elk is coming as well as you, and it also has this opportunity to stream, the games that exist now. If we're not going to be driving, we could do something else. But and it doesn't mean we're going. In one of the studies that I've seen recently is that just because we have self-driving cars doesn't mean we're all going to going to have a social driving experience in terms of having people pick you up in a group, and it's a self-driving robot. It's going to be somebody who wants to drive themselves still, with some interaction perhaps, but mostly they want to do it themselves and drive from one place to the next. And what we found is that when you give people the ability to relax in their car and not worry about driving, they drive more. So that's what our intention is, I think. And ultimately, that's what the OEMs are involved in and concerned about. So can we sell more cars? Yeah. And it doesn't have to be in a fleet. It could be to the same people we've been selling them to. And they'll drive them more. That's good. Go ahead, Scott.
That's
okay.
great, Roger.
All right. Well, we are getting close to the end. So if there's any here, it says here we have one question with Dolby Atmos. Are you using VBAP to the panning, etc.? If you want to explain what VBAP is before you answer that, go right ahead.
Yeah. So it's a certain method how you do panning laws. Yeah. VBAP, vector based or amplitude or whatever. So someone can probably put in the right.
Yeah, it's vector based amplitude panning.
Yeah. I got it right. Yeah. So I got it mostly right. So we're not using that. But it's a similar algorithm. I think it's been also described in papers. So if you look up like Dolby Atmos panner, you should be able to find it. If not, just come back to me. I'll dig you up the reference. And regardless of the user would need input speaker positions, I assume. How would the user typically do that? Now it's not the user or the end consumer as such, or not but we would be working together with the car OEMs or their partner in how to do the staging, like Matias and Dirac, for example, are doing that kind of stuff. Exactly. So we would give kind of like a Dolby Atmos representation and hand it over to Matias and say, now you do the rest, please. Yeah. So we're so it's effectively that's and then you per car line you would do the perfection and optimization as you would as you're used to.
And I think the question is to the point where the end user may want the knob, and the question is, do they really need the knob, or do they, or how much does the OEM or the content, not the content, but the system provider find the need to put in a pan device or what have it may be. So, and
Yeah.
we see that in use cases now in terms of different tonal qualities and different seating positions and so on.
Yeah, I think there's obviously different ways to solve it. I mean, there could be switching profiles. That's one way to do it. There could be user controls of smart faders, let's say, right? There's zones, all that kind of stuff. That's topics for your next one, right? So
yeah, that's it. Yeah, more to talk about. So good. Any last comments on Matias? I think we're going to start to wrap up.
No, but I agree. I mean, that last question is a relevant one, that, how much controls do you want to give the user? But it's also applying to any type of content, but even more so with immersive, because and I think this is where we're going to see different approaches from the OEMs. Some will want to give a very sort of pristine high-end experience, very, very little knobs and controls to change the experience, whereas others want the user to be more interacting with their system. So I think for us, it's more about giving the toolbox for them to be able to do whatever it is.
And the next thing that there aren't that many knobs left, obviously. There's touch screens, and there's, quite frankly, going to be voice. And there is voice, and the knobs will go away, and the user may want to say, okay, pan it rear, pan it left, or give me this space bubble that I want to live in. So it's going to be just another way of finding a way to find the use cases that are important to the end user. So.
And maybe, I mean, one of the things I remember also which we had to deal with a lot in the days when we were working more with multi-channel content in cars is today, or it used to be at least, that the consumer, the driver, would expect to have the fader and the balance controls. Fader becomes a strange thing.
Yeah, and there's also height. Do you want to have a height fade? I'm not sure why, but unless you're just really, really tall or really tall. So, but yeah, so in the end, they don't always get used, but sometimes they're insisted. So okay. Very good. There will be a recording of this session today. Hopefully I mentioned that earlier. So if anyone missed something, they can go back and hopefully find the thing that they wanted to see again. And we are planning a part 2. We're hoping to do that again, perhaps in November through the APEI. So please keep your eyes open for that. Is there anything else you wanted to mention, Scott? I know we have some upcoming events in September of next week even.
Yeah, in fact, we usually have our events, so everybody knows that our events are typically Wednesday at noon Eastern time. So you can kind of count on us to usually have an event most Wednesdays. Next Wednesday is from our modeling and measurement pillar, and it's all about adopting simulation and modeling in the very, very early stages of your product development, to cut back on time to market, to cut back on the number of mistakes we make, because we can predict what might happen much earlier than otherwise. And the leader of that series actually heads up the audio product development for Facebook, Ulrich Scuff, and we've got a series going on starting next Wednesday at noon. So please attend that. It can be very fascinating about what happens in the digital world, and the term we use today, you probably all know, is digital twin. Let's first develop a digital twin, and let's see how that sells for us
and
before we sell the analog twin.
Yeah, that happens in the car as well, because that's, there's less.
Good point, Roger.
Obviously, the prototypes are much more expensive, so
and take quite a while to build.
Yeah,
and test.
There was a question: how do you sign up for these? You go to the APEI website and you can register there for anything that comes up on the events calendar. So please keep your eyes open for Audio Product Education Institute.org.
Right. Thank you, Roger, for that. Yeah, you'll just go ahead and sign up. And we'll
only a mouthful, but it's good.
Yeah.
And so we have that, and I think at the end of the month we have another supply chain and sourcing pillar. This one is about component shortages and supply disruptions. So that's very relevant to anyone who might be interested, who's on from the OEMs or product suppliers, everyone. So, and that'll be hosted by David Limberg and Mike Klasko. So please tune in.
Yeah, and that'll be addressing automotive and consumer products as well. So anybody involved in
Yeah.
the supply chain, and of course the shortages and problems and pricing. And I got a statistic, Roger, as you know, yesterday that at least in California, an empty container costs as much as the contents of the container
Yeah.
as they sit off. They're right out there. It's Long Beach, right over
Just,
there.
yeah.
They're all lined up. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's what
So
do you
it's a
do
good
as a product
topic.
company? It's a great
It'll be
topic.
fun to see the answers to, well, the challenges and what we can do. And so that one that you mentioned before about modeling and measurement, that's going to be a series of events. I think there's
Yes.
three
Right.
events in that series. So
Right.
keep an eye on the events page so you can check them all out. Keep an eye on for automotive audio as well. And
But Roger, before I go, I do want to thank Matias and Andres for great content today and the leadership you're bringing in. And we'd like to have you guys back to present on the consumer product side as well, if you guys are interested.
Yeah. It would be
Sure.
fun. It'd be great
Okay.
because what we know is in consumer will be in the car tomorrow. So
Right.
it's all relevant to us. So,
Right.
Right.
okay. Well, thanks everyone again too. And one more time, we'll just say to everyone who attended, thank you so much. This is Andres Erhardt and Mathias Johansson and Scott Leslie up there. And I'm Roger Shively. Thanks everyone for attending, and please stay safe. And we'll see you next time. It's either good day, good night, or and be safe. Okay. Thank you. We'll see you again.
Thanks,
Bye now.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Roger.
much. Thanks, Roger. Thank you.
Bye bye. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.